So let's kick this off by having a bit of an overview as to Microsoft Teams, what it is and how it works. So the first thing to remember is that Microsoft Teams is available to you typically if you have a full SharePoint license, okay? So if you have Office 365 Business, which is just the desktop apps, then you're not going to get a SharePoint license, which means that you won't get access to Microsoft Teams. So that means Teams is available to all Office 365 suites except for the Office 365 Business. So it's available in Business Premium, it's available basically in E1, it's available in E3, E5 and so on. Okay, and what it does is Teams basically is like a pane of glass across a number of Office 365 services. So it will use the services like Exchange, SharePoint, Planner, all of that will bring those together in a nice simplified interface, which we'll go through a bit further down the track here. Again, we have a dedicated app on all platforms. So we have access available to us in a web browser. We have a desktop app in Windows 10 we can use with Teams, and we have one on our mobile devices. And again, we'll show you this as we progress. Now, again, remember that Teams is enabled by default on all Office 365 tenants. So this means that when you spin up an Office 365 tenant, by default, your users will have access to Teams. They can go in there and potentially start creating their own teams. Now, the administration is done in the admin portal in the services area. So we're not going to go into that in any depth, but basically if you need to admin it, you can do it via the services option in the Office 365 admin portal. Now, with that said, that's the basis of where Teams lies in the Office 365 environment. Let's have a look at some collaboration universes just to get a picture of why Teams is so important and so focal at this point in time. So if we have a look at what we would consider collaboration, I would suggest that you can divide it into three universes: old, new, and modern. So the old world is categorized by stuff on-prem, things done via email, unshared calendars, people making phone calls, still writing information down, and going to a place to work. All right. Now, the reality is for many users, this simply is not good enough. They need the ability to be able to communicate with people outside the organization. They need to be able to work on mobile devices. They need to be able to work from basically anywhere that there's an internet connection. So what happens is these users go to their IT department and they ask for the ability to do all these sort of things. And typically the IT department would say, look, it's too difficult to do, or we can't do it, or there's all these security and compliance issues. And again, they generally slow down the whole process. Now, that frustrates most users because they can't get their job done. They see things out in the public realm that would allow them to do their job. So that's exactly what they do. They go out and they sign up for web-based applications like Dropbox, things like Slack, Facebook, Gmail. They use those services that are outside the corporate environment to actually get work done. Now, this creates a lot of problems for the organization because now it has information outside the organization it doesn't control. It has users working in environments who may potentially retain that information long after leaving the business. And again, it doesn't generally conform to the security requirements of an organization. Now, the solution to this has been Office 365. One of the good things about Office 365 is that we can put services like email and calendaring, we can put them together under a single management bucket that we can assign to users. We can link an email to a calendar, we can schedule events, we can invite people, and again, we can share calendars between multiple users. Likewise, the location for files has been available in Office 365 is SharePoint team sites and OneDrive for Business. So OneDrive for Business for personal files and a team site for shared files. And also in Office 365, we get things like Skype for Business, we get Yammer for our enterprise collaboration, we get Power BI, we get Planner, and so on. But there's still an issue here. Basically, the user will get their inbox and their calendar, but what we see is if a user wants to create a portal to share files or share information with people outside the organization or do projects inside the business, they still need to go to the IT department and ask for them to spin up a SharePoint site, to configure it, to do the permissions and make it available to them. And again, this can put roadblocks up to a user who needs to get their work done. And again, this may force them to consider things like shadow IT. So in the modern world, what we've got is a Microsoft team. Now, the idea behind that is that a user goes in and provisions a team themselves. When they create a team, they automatically get an inbox, an email, shared mailbox, they get a shared calendar, they get a SharePoint Teams site, they get the ability to do chat, planner, and all of these sort of things automatically out of the box. Even if they don't need them immediately or don't use them immediately, this is how a Microsoft team is provisioned. So a team, basically, when it's provisioned, goes out and requests additional resources from services like SharePoint, Exchange, Planner, and brings all of those together under a single banner, which is known as a Microsoft team. Now, this means that when we come to think about control in a Microsoft team environment, in a modern environment, we're shifting from a world where all of the IT resources, the collaboration resources, were controlled by IT. This meant you had to go to the IT department to ask for space on the server. You had to ask for an additional email account to be created to share with people outside the organization. Well, that's now changed. With Microsoft Teams, users by default are able to go in and provision their own team. This means they'll provision their own mailbox, their own SharePoint site. They'll get the resources immediately. They don't need to go to IT and ask for approval generally. It also means that we need to look at our data in a different way. We're moving from a world where on-prem was very much around file servers, was drive letters and subfolders and shares. And that's very complicated for a lot of users. Users couldn't remember where information was. They had to get permissions set up, allowing them to access that information, and that became very confusing. So therefore, we've moved to a world where data is ad hoc. It really doesn't matter in an Office 365 environment where the data is as much, because we have technologies like search. So the idea here is that we use the Microsoft team as a working area for a group like HR, finance, admin. They put their files in there, and then anything they put in there can be searched, can be filtered, can be tagged. So again, the structuring, deep structures are not best practice. We want a very flat structure, and we allow users to search across all their information using technologies such as Delve. The other thing is it means we move from an environment where access was very linear. You go to an F drive, then a folder, then a subfolder, and a subfolder beyond that. In your inbox, when you work with emails, you would go to your inbox and you work from top to bottom. Well, the change now with Microsoft Teams is you can be involved in a number of different teams, which means that each team has its own chat. So you could be across 4 or 5 different chats. Inside those chats could be a number of different conversations. So again, the idea here is we're moving from a very linear world, working top to bottom, to a world where we have to work in parallel. We have to be across multiple information streams and multiple teams all sharing information. And that's exactly what Microsoft Teams is designed for. So in a bit more detail, what is Microsoft Teams? So basically it is a chat, call and meetings service for today's environment. Again, it's aimed at bringing all these collaboration resources together in one single pane of glass rather than siloing them in independent services. It's integrated with Office 365 apps like Planner, like OneNote, like all sorts of options that are now built in and surfaced through Microsoft Teams. You can customize it, you can extend it. We'll give you a bit of an idea and show you how to do that. You can extend what you can see in Teams, but underlying all this is the enterprise security, compliance, and manageability. So because it uses Exchange mailboxes, because it uses SharePoint team sites, it's built on those same technology. It uses those same technologies, the compliance level, also the recovery, also the discovery options are basically the same as the individual services brought together under a single banner known as Microsoft Teams. Now, what we're seeing is we're seeing the importance of collaboration and communications being done inside Teams. So now we've got the ability to share emails into Teams, we can share chat, we can share files, But as we progress, we're seeing the Skype for Business client, the Skype messaging environment being rolled more and more into Teams. So this means that you can start a video collaboration directly within Teams by a single press of the button, and when it integrates with the PSTN calling, you can make calls directly in and out of Teams. So again, think of the Microsoft team as rolling all the best of Skype for Business also into this interface, along with the best of SharePoint, along with the best of Exchange, and so on. Now, we've also got this ability to integrate directly with our Office 365 application. Again, we can co-author documents, we can work with things like OneNote, Power BI, Planner. All the information in there is searchable as it is in any Office 365 environment. We've also got the ability to include things like bots as well to do automated process. So the idea here is you can collaborate via chat, you can collaborate via email, you can share files, you can work on them together, you can have conversations via video conferencing, all built into a single environment known as Microsoft Teams. And it doesn't stop there. We can take this environment and we can integrate that with third-party apps. The list of third-party apps that are now available and will integrate with Microsoft Teams is basically growing every day. We've got the ability, as I mentioned, to add bots, and these bots provide automation, and we'll show you how some of those work and give advantage in Microsoft Teams. All right. What we expect to see is over time more and more of these apps and extensible nature is going to, again, allow more and more applications to be integrated into Teams. So Teams is going to become that central hub that most people are going to be doing their day-to-day work in Office 365. Now, I mentioned integrations here. You'll see some very common names like Adobe, Hootsuite, SurveyMonkey, Asana. All those sort of people already directly integrate into Microsoft Teams thanks to their app ability. Now, as I mentioned, that Teams has the ability to store files that a group of people can work on together. Now, that storage is basically in SharePoint. So when we create a Microsoft team, we get a dedicated SharePoint site. That is where the files live. If you look at the interface here to the Microsoft team, if we click on the files option, you'll see that you get a list of files and folders, but you also get the option to open directly in SharePoint. Now, when you do that, you'll get a full SharePoint site. So behind every Microsoft team is a full SharePoint site. The Microsoft team is showing a limited subset or a simplified subset, which is more than adequate for most users. However, for power users, we can go into the SharePoint site and we can start building that out as we would any SharePoint team site. Again, we'll show you this when we get to looking at the individual clients. As I mentioned, there are a range of bots that are available that can be added to channels that can do automated tasks for you. And again, it is possible for you to create your own bot, to write your own bots, integrate with things like Microsoft Flow to automate so much of information coming into Teams and also the actions inside Teams if you so want. As I mentioned, the Microsoft Teams environment is basically underpinned by the enterprise security, compliance and manageability that comes with Office 365. Okay, so we've got the compliance around HIPAA, we've got the ability to do mobile device management and application management. We can do multi-factor authentication. So all those great security services that are part of Office 365 are also part of Microsoft Teams, because Microsoft Teams basically uses the services of Office 365 to surface and allow people to be more productive while maintaining all of those features underneath. So again, some use cases that you can think about when it comes to Teams are, imagine a customer support team. This would allow people to have conversations about issues that arise in customer service. It would allow emails to be inflowing into that team to be answered. Again, it would allow them to share documents and so on. Another really good one is a marketing department. They can have the area for campaigns, they can also have tasks, they can manage events, they can do content, which they can then produce and push out to their full organization, and they can work together either in email, in chat, or in video conferencing or whatever. So as you see here, there's quite a range of options for working with teams. Again, it's flexible. It's up to you what makes most sense to the organization. But generally, a rule of thumb is when a group of people need to work together basically on a single function like a HR, finance, admin, that's the perfect environment for creating a Microsoft team for those people. Now, one of the great things that Microsoft Teams also now provides is guest access. So what that means is provided someone has an Azure Active Directory account, Office 365 for example, or a Microsoft account, they can be added to Teams, all right? So basically that means you can invite anybody outside the organization. They can authenticate with their email address, using a Microsoft account linked to that, and then basically they can work with the environment in the team with you and have just about the same sort of rights. Now, if we look at exactly what the capabilities are, you'll see that a full Teams user basically gets the resources across the board, whereas a guest user does have some limitations. So they can't share a chat file, they can't add apps, they can't create a team and discover public teams, and they can't view your org chart. So again, they're allowed to come in and do the basics of participating in chats, to be able to work with messages, to share files, but again, they're not administrators of the environment. So it's a perfect way to get people outside the business working on common things like files, folders, and conversations, keeping everybody in the loop. Now, guest access in Office 365 is generally disabled by default. What you'll need to do to enable guest access is to go into the services area in the admin center. And again, basically, you then need to select the settings by user/license type, as you see on the slide here. And then basically, you just need to turn on the ability for external access, right? So remember that by default, external access will be off in your tenant generally. You'll need to just go into the admin area and go in and enable it. All right, with that said, why don't we pop out and have a quick look at what Teams is really all about. So you'll see here I've logged into my Office 365 portal in my browser, and again I'm logged in here as Lewis Collins, all right? So just keep that in mind. You'll see that when I go to the Office 365 homepage, you'll see I get a number of icons here which should be familiar, and you'll notice here that I get the option to go to Teams. Now if this doesn't appear, I can always go up to the app launcher in the top left. I have Teams there available to me, and if I can't find it, I can also go to All Apps, and then I can cycle down and find Teams in there. Now when I select that, what's going to happen is it's going to open Teams in a new browser session, which you can see here. Now in this case, this user has access to 3 teams: Sales, Help Desk, and NSA. You'll see that under the NSA, for example, we have a number of channels, right? So these channels allow you to focus on conversations typically around a topic. So at the moment, I'm in the executive branch here. If we go to the right, you'll see that I have the conversations available to me, and I have the ability to go to files. So if we go to conversations here, basically what I can do is simply go in here and type information, or start a conversation here. All right, enter, and then that will be then made available to others who are part of that team. I can also go in and @mention people, right? So if I go in and @mention myself, all right, and you'll see that, please look here. All right, so what it'll do, it will go out and @mention that person and provide them basically with a mention. So you'll see that that's popped up. I also have another session there that is running Teams with this with myself logged in. All right, you'll see down the bottom here that I've got the ability to again expand the compose box, so I can make this larger. I can use bold, italic. I can format my text a number of different ways. You'll see that I can also attach a file if I want. So I can go recent files, I can pull it from my OneDrive, or I can upload it from my computer. I can add some emojis, right? I can also add some stickers in here, and this is the option to basically allow me to launch a video meeting if I want. And if I hit the ellipse, I do get a number of different options. So I can go in here and, for example, get real-time stock quotes, or have a look at the weather if I want to. All right, so it's quite easy to do that. Now, if I want to move between different teams, basically all I need to do is simply select that area. You'll see that when it's bolded, it indicates there's information that I haven't read as yet. All right, and if I go and look at the top option up here, activity, you'll see that if I get mentioned, this will be my activities. If I come down to feed, again, I'll look at my activity here. All right, so this is what's showing me what I've been doing of late. This area called chats is the area where I can have individual chats with people. So if I want to, I can have private chats, but it's currently showing me the conversations. Again, you'll see that I get a list of my organization, and I also get the ability, so this is the org chart. You'll see that I get the ability also to look at the activity that I've undertaken in here. All right. These are my teams, obviously, which we were just on. If I go to my meetings, this will be linked to my calendar, so I can see any meetings or events that I have scheduled, and this will show me the files I have across my Microsoft Teams and my OneDrive. So if I go back to my team here, let's go back to Executive Branch and let's have a look at files. So basically now I'm looking at any files that are in this area that's available to the Executive Branch. So I can go in here and create a new file. Okay, so a Word document, Excel, PowerPoint. I can upload a file or a group of files. I can get a link, and here's the option here to open in SharePoint. Now you'll notice the final option here allows me to add cloud storage. So I can actually connect my team to a SharePoint site, to Dropbox, Box, ShareFile, and Google Drive. So I can link those to my team and potentially move information between them. So let's go back to the NSA general area here. Let's have a look at files, and we should see that there are a number of files here. Okay, so you'll see that I've got it linked to a Dropbox account, again, that I could click on and browse to automatically, because now I've done the linking. These are some files here. Now if I select the option here to open in SharePoint, what it's going to do is open a new tab. It's going to go to that SharePoint site. So we've got a SharePoint site underpinning that Microsoft team called NSA. And again, here are those documents as you see, exactly the same in the Teams environment. Now the way this works is if we have a look at the one document library that is created in SharePoint, you'll see that we have a folder for each channel. So if we go back here and have a look, you'll see the NSA has General, Announcements, Executive Branch, Social Media. And if we have a look at the folder structure under Documents, we have exactly the same thing here. All right. So again, if we go into General, you'll see that we have those same documents. But if I go home, you'll see that this is a full SharePoint site. I can now go in and start customizing, and I've got news there. I can add widgets. I can build it out. But again, I've got a simplified view here in my Microsoft team, which just focuses on the folder inside that one document library. Now what I can also do with my team, as I mentioned, is if I go to the plus button up here, you'll see that I can now add a tab from a range of services. So I can link to other SharePoint sites. I can have a PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote file embedded. I can go to a website, so I can provide a website link, and then I've got third-party options like Poly to allow it to do polls. And if we scroll through here, you'll see GitHub, I've got Asana, I've got Picket images, I've got all sorts of things that I can basically add in to that area. All right. Now, again, if I go into the ellipse here, you'll see that, again, I can go into a number of different options, or I can go in and select more apps. So these are the options that I can now start extending my environment. All right. So I can add these into my team as required. So to show you what that's about, let's go back to a team here. All right. So let's go back to the NSA, and what I'm going to do is basically I am going to call on a bot here. So the way that I call on a bot, I treat it just like calling a person. So if I go in here and call the Hipmunk bot, all right, so that's a travel bot, so you'll see that comes up. So I'm going to go in here and basically get Hipmunk to find me the best travel deal between Sydney and Melbourne. So what that's doing now is it's an automated process that's kicked off in the background that is going to go off and come back and give me the best deal on flights that it can find, and then allow me to take additional actions there. All right, so that'll take a minute while that does. You'll see here that in our messages, we've also got the ability to flag. We can also like this message. All right, and we've got an ellipse here to allow us to edit, delete, and mark unread. And we can also copy a link so that we can share it with people. So now you'll see that Hipmunk has returned, so the bot has completed, and basically it's telling me this is the best deal that it can find. So $178 on July 27 to July 29 will get me from Sydney to Melbourne. I can go in and click for more flight options. I can look at hotel options or create a fare alert. Okay, so the idea here is, as you'll see, I've got a number of bots that I've embedded in here, and they can do a number of different actions. All right, so that's the concept behind bots. They're automated processes that I can push off basically and get them to do things for me. Up the top here, you'll see I've got the ability to go in and create a new chat if I want. All right, so I can target individuals and have it private. I can also go up here and I can also do slash commands. So if I do slash, I can have a look at the activity. Right, so let's go in here and have a look at activity. All right, so if I look at my own activity, maybe I've got to look at somebody else's. So let's go in here and see what activity myself has done as an admin. All right, so you can see that sort of stuff. So again, go in here and basically type slash and you'll get all these slash commands. The other thing that we can do is we can basically use this as a search. So if I just type the word Azure and do a search, now it's going to search across my messages. All right, it's going to search across people, and it's also going to search across files. So you'll see it's got a number of files here that have the word Azure either in the title or actually inside that document. Okay, now again, if I click on that file, you'll see it will now view this as a PDF. All right, and then I can zoom in, zoom out, I can start conversations and whatnot depending on the file. Okay, so again, we've got a single environment that takes advantages of all the things that we get in SharePoint. So as I mentioned, this is the web-based application. So let's have a look at the desktop application. So you'll see in this case that the desktop application is logged in as a different user. So I'm logged in as myself up here in the top corner here. And you'll see I have access to a number of those same groups, but also some additional groups here. So you'll see that, for example, we've got a group here called Patrons, and I go to Microsoft 365. You'll see I've got a lot more conversations, links to areas on the internet. These are all my files and folders. I can drill into this, but in the background here, I've still got access to this in SharePoint if I so desire to do that. Now, if I have a look at Office 365 here, you'll see that I've got a number of additional options up the top here. Now, if I click on the Office 365 Codex, what this is, in effect, this is an embedded OneNote inside my Microsoft Teams. So this basically is a OneNote that I've created with information about Office 365, all the links, all the information. I'm making that available to my patron community, and they can then access this basically directly in Microsoft Teams. So again, if I go in here and, for example, have a look at tutorials, all right, you'll see that these are all the tabs that are available. I can drill in and there's all the information. So they can obviously open this in OneNote on their desktop if they want, but they can go in and access it directly in Teams. The way that I did that, basically I just selected plus and then went in to OneNote, and then basically it says, do I want to create a new notebook, browse notebooks, or paste a link. So I just added an existing notebook in there. So it's pretty easy to do that. Now, you'll see here in the NSA group, I basically have a little notification here indicating that I was mentioned by Lewis. So that happened in the web version. You'll see a little @ symbol here that I was mentioned. Again, if I go and look at my activity, you'll see that I was mentioned. So those sort of things are basically drawn to my attention there. So again, remember that we've got the ability to access this in the web, which we've done. So if we go back into the Teams, you'll see that we're mentioned here, logged in as Lewis Collins. I've got a desktop apps here, right? So if I go back to the same team and we go in and again have a look at the executive branch. All right, so bring that up. All right, so I'm in here. So now I can go in here and reply and ask what's up. All right, and then if I go back to my browser where Lewis Collins is logged in, you'll see get a reply. I go to executive branch here, and you'll see that I get the reply. So one of the big benefits of using chat is that it will cut down on your emails quite dramatically, basically because it's all available in one location. And remember, it's all in public, which means that I can go in here and also do a search if I wanted to. Now, I did mention that not only have we got access to a web-based version and a dedicated desktop version, we also happen to have access to a mobile app. So if I swap across to my iOS device here, you'll see that I've got an icon for Teams. So if I run Teams, you'll see that I'm logged in as myself. All right, so you'll see that the teams that I have access to. So if I go, for example, into my Microsoft 365 team, you'll see that I have those conversations in there. All right, so I've got my files and my tabs. All right, so if I go into my files, again, you'll see the list of files that were part of that team. I can then open them, view them, and work on them basically as I did in my other client. So again, down the bottom here, I've got my activity, I've got my individual chats, I can do messages, and again, if the device supports, I can also make phone calls out of there. So again, one of the really handy things about this is the fact that we've also got mobile device. Looks very much like the web, looks very much like the desktop app, so it's very similar, makes it much easier for users to grasp and to work with. So again, there's probably a lot more to it. Again, if you want to admin things and you do have the right, just click on the three dots. You can favorite a team here so that will appear in the list. You can manage the team if you have rights. You can add an additional channel, leave the team, or get a link. So again, we're not going to cover that in any detail here. And there's also another ellipse up here. Again, you'll see that you get the ability here for more options. And again, a lot of the information that you see in the clients are very similar. So again, you'll see up here, I get those three ellipses and very same, no matter what the environment that I'm working in. All right, so that's a bit of an overview of what it actually looks like to use Teams. So let's go back to the slides. Okay, so where does Teams fit into the whole collaboration aspect in Office 365? Well, generally, you have an area for shared data and personal data. That all lives in Office 365, as I've mentioned, and typically you can have the individual services of SharePoint, Exchange, Planner, Yammer, Skype, so on. The individual locations for your emails is your personal inbox, all right, and that's handled by Exchange. The location for your personal files is OneDrive for Business, and that's basically handled by SharePoint technology. Now, what we can do is we can have the same environment where we can have a team site that a group of people use, and that's hosted on SharePoint. Same with a shared mailbox, a planner plan, Yammer, Skype, and so on. Now, if we start building these together, we get something called Office 365 Groups. We also get Staff Hub, which includes rostering. And then what you'll see here with Teams, Teams is built on an Office 365 Group, is built on a Staff Hub, includes all of that goodness in there, adds persistent chat, and also adds Skype in there as well. So again, the idea here, as I mentioned initially, is when a user creates a team, they get all of those resources immediately. They don't have to worry about provisioning them or doing permissions. They just invite people, and all of that's handled directly by Office 365. So that's one of the really big benefits of using Teams. It makes it simple to roll out and simple for users to get started and actually work on collaboration. Now, in the bigger picture here is where does Teams fit into things like SharePoint, hub sites, Yammer? So the way I like to think about it is in this layered arrangement. So the OneDrive for Business is layer one. That's typically where people will do their individual work. They'll start creating the file they want to work on it until they've got it to a point, and then they'll move it into a Microsoft Teams. So if I'm creating a budget, I'll start in Excel on my OneDrive for Business. I will then take that file when I'm ready, push it into the finance team, where the group that I'm in, the finance team, will work on that. And then from there, they will push it into, for example, a team site. And that team site then will be available to everybody in the organization. They'll probably just be able to read it and consume it. They won't be able to change it, but it will be pushed from my OneDrive to my team. When it's ready, it will go to a public team site that everybody has access to. And then that's controlled navigation-wise by communications and hub sites. So the idea here is you'll have a company intranet. People will come in and they'll get news updates. They'll click onto the finance section. They'll be able to read that information, download what they need, and get on with doing what they need to. The finance team would typically have the ability to push updates into that. Likewise, HR would have their own area. They will push documents in that everybody could consume. Above that, obviously, is Yammer. So Yammer is conversation-based. So again, once it's been pushed from OneDrive to Teams to a Teams site, to communications and hub sites, I would then say you can announce it on Yammer. So what you would see is that someone from finance would go and say, hey guys, this new file on the budget is now complete. It is located in, here's the link to it. So again, think of a Yammer as corporate wide, and obviously outside that, we have our external users. So the other way to think about this is that as we move from OneDrive for Business to Yammer, we're changing from a creation mode to a consumption mode. So we do most of our creation in OneDrive and Teams, and as we get out to team sites and Yammer, we're basically consuming the information. Also, the audience increases. So OneDrive is for individuals, Teams is for a smaller group of people, a team site then becomes the next level up, and so on until Yammer is across the organization. So in summary, basically we're seeing information flow as best practice from OneDrive to team sites, and so on all the way out to Yammer. So that's probably the best practice and where Teams fits in the collaboration environment when it comes to Office 365. So some takeaways from this presentation for you is that Teams is a different way of collaborating. You really have to look at things slightly differently and then look at the fact that you're enabling your users to get done what they need to without getting in their way. So you give them a team site, you give them a mailbox, you give them all these functions and a nice interface, they can get their job done quickly and easily without having to wait for everything to be provisioned via IT. Teams enables users to, again, work with others so they can get their job done. So think of Teams as the place that users will do probably the majority of their work day in and day out. The naming conventions and the setup of services can be confusing at times. If you allow users to create teams, you may end up with 2 accounts or 2 HR. Again, that's why IT is still required to have some oversight and some control to make sure it's done in an appropriate way for the organization. And again, you need to have a think about how you're going to do backup and recovery. The services are underpinned by SharePoint, Exchange, which have their own retention environments. But again, if you need something more than that, you need to make sure that you have enabled that, or if you purchase that from a third party if you need it. Again, remember that underneath it's just an Exchange mailbox and it's a SharePoint team site, right? So that way of backing up the information is still very, very standard and supported by third-party tools. And probably the most important thing here to consider is that Microsoft Teams is being widely adopted and will continue to iterate rapidly. I'm sure that in a very short period of time there'll be a whole range of new options that are going to allow users to be even more productive. But the focus is that we're looking at a single place to give us all the power of the services in Office 365 with a simplified interface, that being Teams, right? So again, certainly would recommend that you spend some time understanding Teams, working with Teams, and working out where it makes sense for your organization, because it really is going to become so critical and central to the way Office 365 develops over time, and also it will have all the tools that the users need to get their job done on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention. I'll also give you some resources here. The slides will be available for download. They'll be in a link underneath this video. So again, you'll be able to download those and have a look and take advantage of some of the fantastic resources Microsoft has made available to you. And again, some resources from me that I would certainly commend you to have a look at. My blog is the best place to go. You can sign up for some free SharePoint training via email. And again, I'll point you to my Patreon community, the last one there in a link, again at www.ciaopspatron.com. You can contact me on the Twitter, Facebook, email, and also on Skype for Business with any questions that you may have around this presentation. But with that, I thank you very much for watching.